The Arizona Territory, 1876. Sarah Bennett came west looking for her father. What she found was his grave, or so she was told. The sun was a hammer, pounding the dust into a fine, choking powder. Every rattle of the stagecoach was a reminder that she was a world away from the cool, shaded streets of Boston. She pulled her shawl tight, a useless habit in the sweltering heat. Across from her, an old man with a face like a dried riverbed smiled. "First time out west, miss?" Sarah nodded, the gesture tired. "I'm heading to Fort Apache, to meet my father, Colonel William Bennett." She felt the worn edges of his last letter in her pocket. 3 years. 3 years since her mother's funeral, when he'd sent her to live with aunts and uncles while he commanded a lonely outpost on the edge of civilization. Now, at 19, she was finally coming home to him. The old man's smile vanished. Fort Apache. He spat a stream of tobacco juice out the window. Dangerous country. The Apache have been on the warpath for months. "I'm aware of the risks," Sarah said, though the words felt hollow. The stories in the newspapers were like grim fairy tales. Savages, bloodshed, a world of violence she couldn't truly imagine. But the real story was far stranger than any newspaper could print. The driver's voice cut through the shimmering heat. "Watson Station. 10 minutes. Last stop before the fort." Sarah saw it on the horizon, a sad collection of wooden shacks that looked like they were about to collapse into the dust. This was it, the last bit of civilization. As the coach groaned to a halt, the station owner, a man with a mustache that seemed to have a life of its own, helped her down. "Staying the night, miss? We got rooms." She paid for her lodging and sat in the small, grimy dining room, pushing beans around her plate. She was exhausted, lonely, and starting to feel a deep, creeping dread. Then the door flew open. A handful of cavalry soldiers stormed in, their blue uniforms caked in dirt. Leading them was a tall man, his dark hair shot through with gray, his face a mask of authority. But when his eyes landed on her, the mask cracked. "Father," she whispered, rising from her chair. Colonel Bennett crossed the room in 3 long strides and wrapped her in a stiff, awkward hug. "Sarah, you've grown." "It's been 3 years," she said softly. He cleared his throat, pulling away. "There's been a change of plans. Apaches were spotted near the trail. We're escorting everyone to the fort tonight. It's not safe to wait." Her heart hammered against her ribs, fear and a strange thrill, all at once. "No arguments," he said, his voice hard as iron. "We leave in an hour." As she repacked the single trunk that held the remnants of her Boston life, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled into something she didn't understand. The West was already a wilder, more dangerous place than she had ever dreamed. And the night was just beginning. The journey was a tense, silent crawl through the darkness. Her father rode alongside the wagon, his hand never far from his pistol. The soldiers scanned the hills, their faces tight with concentration. "Scouts reported movement," her father ordered. "Keep your eyes open." Sarah stared out at the alien landscape. The moon turned the cacti into monstrous shapes, the rocks into crouching beasts. She thought about the Apache, the faceless enemy her father was here to fight. Were they really the monsters from the stories? She never would have guessed that from a ridge not far away, a young Apache warrior was watching them. His name was Taz, and he wasn't just watching, he was waiting. Destiny was a strange and terrible thing in this land, and Sarah's was hurtling toward her, hidden in the shadows of the moonlit canyon. The desert had its own plans for her. The attack came with the dawn. 1 second, there was the rumble of wagon wheels and the soft snort of horses. The next, the air shattered. War cries echoed from the canyon walls, high and terrifying, like the screams of eagles. Figures appeared on the ridges, moving with a speed that didn't seem human. "Take cover!" her father bellowed, his pistol already drawn. "Protect the civilians!" Sarah dove to the floor of the wagon, the missionary's wife beside her, praying in a frantic whisper. Through a tear in the canvas, she saw flashes of the battle. A soldier falling, an arrow sprouting from his chest, the crack of rifles, the screams of men. "Sarah!" Her father was at the wagon's edge, his face grim. "The rocks! Run for the rocks, now!" She didn't hesitate. She scrambled out of the wagon and ran, the dusty ground flying beneath her feet. An Apache warrior loomed in her path, his face a nightmare of red and black paint. He raised a club. Before she could scream, he was gone. Her father had clubbed him from behind with his rifle butt and was now pulling her forward. "Keep moving!" he yelled, firing his pistol over her shoulder. They reached a cluster of massive boulders. He shoved her into a narrow crevice. "Stay here," he commanded, his eyes burning into hers. "Don't move, no matter what you see. Reinforcements will come. Do you understand?" "Father, no." "That's an order, Sarah." His expression softened for just a fraction of a second. "I've lost too much time with you. I won't lose you completely." Then he was gone, running back into the heart of the fight. She pressed herself against the cold stone, hot tears blurring her vision. She watched the soldiers fight. She watched them die. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. It was a slaughter. Her father was a force of nature, a whirlwind of desperate courage. He made it halfway back to the other soldiers when an arrow hit him in the shoulder. He staggered but kept fighting. A second arrow struck his leg. He fell to one knee. A warrior, taller than the rest, with a single eagle feather in his hair, approached him. It was Taz. Colonel Bennett raised his pistol. It clicked. Empty. The warrior raised a tomahawk. Sarah clamped her hand over her mouth to stop the scream. She watched her father fall, face down in the red dust. The battle ended quickly after that. The last few soldiers were taken. The wagons were looted. Everything was silent except for the wind. For hours, Sarah huddled in the rocks, paralyzed by grief and terror. The sun climbed, baking the canyon floor. The Apache gathered their spoils, preparing to leave. The tall warrior, Taz, seemed to be in charge, giving quiet orders. Then he stopped. He tilted his head, as if listening to something only he could hear. And to Sarah's absolute horror, he turned his head and looked directly at her hiding place. It was impossible. She hadn't made a sound. She was hidden in deep shadow. But he knew. He walked toward the rocks, his steps slow, deliberate. The walk of a predator that knows its prey is trapped. Sarah shrank back, but there was nowhere to go. His shadow fell over her. She looked up into his eyes. They weren't filled with hate. They weren't filled with bloodlust. They were calm, analytical. He was studying her. "Please," she whispered, the word useless. He reached down and pulled her to her feet. His grip was like steel, firm but not brutal. He touched his own chest. "Taz," he said. Then he pointed at her. He wanted her name. "Sarah," she managed, her voice a dry rasp. Taz nodded once. He called out to two other warriors. They spoke in their own tongue, a rapid-fire conversation filled with gestures. She was the subject. Her life was being debated right in front of her. Finally, Taz turned back. He motioned for her to follow. When she hesitated, frozen in fear, he spoke one word in broken English. "Come." She had no choice. He led her to a paint horse and lifted her onto its back as if she weighed nothing. He swung up behind her, his arms caging her in as he took the reins. As they rode away from the massacre, she looked back. The bodies were gone. Her father's body was gone. The Apache had taken them, vanished them, as if the battle had never happened. It was the final, terrifying mystery in a day full of them. Why had they taken the bodies? And why had they taken her? They rode for hours, through a landscape that seemed impossible to navigate. Sarah lost all track of time, of direction. The only reality was the hard rhythm of the horse and the solid presence of the warrior behind her. By nightfall, they reached a hidden camp. Women and children emerged from hide shelters, their excited chatter dying as they saw her. A white woman, a captive. Taz helped her down. An old woman, her face a beautiful map of wrinkles, approached. Her eyes were dark and sharp, and they missed nothing. She spoke to Taz, and he answered with deep respect. He gestured to the old woman. "Grandmother," he said in English. Then he looked at Sarah. "You stay." The old woman, whose name was Nasha, led Sarah to a shelter. She was given stew and water. Sarah had expected cruelty, a cage, a rope. She got a meal and a buffalo robe to sleep on. The simple kindness broke her, and she finally cried, silent tears tracking paths through the grime on her face. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. These weren't the one-dimensional savages from the dime novels. They were people, complicated, organized, and right now, her captors. Outside, she could hear Taz arguing with another warrior. The other man's voice was sharp, angry. Taz's was low, firm. She didn't need to understand the words to know they were arguing about her. Her life hung in the balance. The proper Boston girl was dead, left behind in the dust of the canyon. In her place was a prisoner, her fate in the hands of the man who had killed her father. But as she fell into an exhausted sleep, a new, terrifying thought surfaced. She had seen Taz raise the tomahawk. She had seen her father fall. But she had never actually seen the blow land. The days bled into weeks. Life in the Apache camp was hard, a constant rhythm of work dictated by the sun. Nasha, Taz's grandmother, had taken Sarah under her wing. She was a stern teacher, using gestures and single Apache words until Sarah began to learn. Wash, cook, sew. The lessons were simple, practical, survival. Sarah rarely saw Taz. He and the other warriors would vanish for days, returning with deer slung over their horses, or sometimes with items that were clearly not Apache. A new rifle, a sack of flour, a bolt of cloth. Sarah learned not to ask where they came from. She didn't want to know. One morning, as she was grinding corn with Nasha, Taz appeared. He spoke to his grandmother, then turned to Sarah. "Come," he said. That same command. Nasha nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. So Sarah followed him. 2 horses were waiting at the edge of the camp. "We go," he said. Sarah hesitated. "Where? Why?" "Not far," he added, seeming to read her mind. "Return sunset." She let him help her onto the horse. They rode in silence, climbing higher into the mountains. The air grew cooler, cleaner. After an hour, they reached a high plateau. The view was breathtaking, a vast panorama of desert and sky that made her feel impossibly small. Taz tied the horses and motioned for her to sit on a flat rock. He sat nearby, leaving a respectful distance between them. "My grandmother says you learn good," he said, his English slow but clear. "She says you have a strong spirit." "She is a good teacher," Sarah replied, surprised. "Nasha was wife to a great chief," Taz said. "She knows much." They sat in silence, the quiet more comfortable than it should have been. Finally, Sarah found her courage. "My father. The soldier. What happened to his body?" Taz met her gaze. His expression was a stone wall. He fought with courage. He was given a warrior's burial. It wasn't the answer she expected. A burial? By them? Tears pricked her eyes. "Why did you take me? Why didn't you kill me?" He was quiet for a long time. The wind whispered through the scrub pines. "6 moons ago," he finally said, his voice low. "Soldiers came to our camp. The warriors were hunting. They killed women, children, my sister, her baby." His hands clenched into fists. "White man calls this war. We call it murder." A cold dread washed over Sarah. Her father's letters had never mentioned such an attack. I'm so sorry." "I wanted to hate all white eyes," he continued, his voice tight with remembered pain. "I wanted to make them all feel what we felt. But Nasha says hate is a poison that kills the hater." He looked directly at her. "When I found you in the rocks, I saw fear in your eyes, not evil. I saw my sister." Then he said something that sent a jolt through her. "And I saw the mark on your wrist." Sarah froze. The mark. A small, strange birthmark she'd had since she was a child. A faint, swirling pattern, almost like a bird in flight. She'd always hidden it under her sleeves, embarrassed by it. How could he have seen it? And why did it matter? "What about my birthmark?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It is not a birthmark," Taz said, his eyes intense. "It is a sign. The sign of the Sky Singer. An old prophecy in my tribe tells of a white woman with the mark who would come to us. A woman who would be a bridge between our two worlds, or the one who would lead to our destruction. Sarah stared at him, her mind reeling. Prophecy? A sign on her skin? It was insane. It was the kind of story you'd read in a cheap novel. But the look on his face was deadly serious. Suddenly her capture made a different, more terrifying kind of sense. She wasn't just a random captive. She wasn't a replacement for his sister. She was a symbol. A pawn in a game she didn't even know was being played. And her very existence was now a source of deep division among the tribe. Some believe you are a sacred person, Taz explained. Nasha is one of them. Others, he paused, believe you are a witch sent by the white man's god to destroy us. The hostile warrior she'd heard arguing with Taz. His name was Kale. He was the leader of the faction that saw her as a curse. He had been arguing for her death. "And you?" she whispered. "What do you believe?" Taz stood up and looked out over the vast expanse. "I believe the spirits do not play games. You are here for a reason. But whether it is for good or for ill, that is what we must discover." He turned back to her, and the next thing he said chilled her to the bone. "Your father knew about the prophecy." Sarah felt the world tilt on its axis. "What? That's impossible." "He sought us out many years ago, before you were born," Taz said. "He spoke with my grandfather, the chief. He knew of the mark. He knew one day you might come." Her father. A colonel in the U.S. cavalry secretly meeting with an Apache chief to discuss a prophecy? It made no sense. He was a man of logic, of tactics and order. Not myth and legend. Unless he wasn't. "The soldiers at the fort will be looking for me," she said, her mind grasping for something solid. "Yes," Taz agreed. "Soon we move camp. Deeper into the mountains, where they cannot follow. And I go with you." It wasn't a question. "You stay with us," he corrected, "until your path is chosen." "Chosen by who?" "By you," he said. "When the time comes, you will choose. To return to your people, or to stay with us." The idea was dizzying. A choice? She was a prisoner, an object of prophecy. But he was offering her a choice. "Why would you let me go?" she asked. "I could lead the soldiers right to you." A faint smile touched his lips. "You could. But you would not betray the people who have become your family." Family. The word was a punch to the gut. The people who had killed her friends, who had taken her from her life, who had made her watch her father die. But then she thought of Nasha's rough kindness, of the children who were starting to smile at her, of Taz, this warrior of impossible contradictions. "Your father was a soldier," Taz said, as if reading her thoughts. "He chose the path of war. You are not a soldier. You can choose a different path." As they rode back to the camp, Sarah's world had been completely rebuilt, then shattered all over again. Her father wasn't the man she thought he was. Her life wasn't her own. She was trapped between a prophecy she didn't believe, a past that was a lie, and a future she couldn't possibly imagine. Back at the camp she saw things differently. The curious stares of the other Apache now seemed laced with something more. Awe from some. Deep suspicion from others. Kale, the warrior who wanted her dead, watched her every move, his eyes filled with open hatred. She was no longer just a captive. She was a test. A living, breathing omen. And she was beginning to suspect that the ambush in the canyon wasn't a random raid at all. It was an interception. They hadn't been attacking the wagon train. They had been coming for her. Life settled into a new, tense routine. Sarah was no longer just a camp helper. She was an object of intense scrutiny. Nasha began teaching her more than just chores. She taught her the tribe's history, the names of the spirits, the meanings of the songs. It felt less like education and more like an indoctrination, an attempt to awaken the sky singer within her. Taz, too, spent more time with her. Their conversations by the fire were no longer just about language. He told her stories of his people, of their long struggle against the Mexicans and now the Americans. He spoke of the sacred lands they had lost, the promises that had been broken. He was testing her, she realized, gauging her sympathies, her spirit. He was trying to decide if she was the savior from the prophecy or the destroyer. One evening, he asked her about Boston. She described the crowded streets, the tall buildings, the endless noise. "It sounds like an anthill," he said, frowning. "Too many people, living on top of each other. How can the spirit breathe in such a place?" "It has its own kind of beauty," she defended, but the words felt weak. She found it hard to remember what was so wonderful about that life. "Beauty is here," Taz said, gesturing to the brilliant tapestry of stars overhead. "In the mountains, in the desert, where a person is small, and the Great Spirit is close." As summer turned to autumn, the tribe prepared to move to their winter grounds. Sarah worked alongside the other women, her skin now tanned and her hands calloused. She was stronger than she'd ever been. On the night before they left, Nasha gave her a gift. A dress of the softest deerskin, beautifully decorated with beads and porcupine quills. "For you," Nasha said in Apache. "No more white woman clothes." Putting it on felt like shedding a skin. It was an acceptance, a claiming. Part of her felt a thrill of belonging. But another, deeper part screamed in protest. She was Sarah Bennett. Her father was Colonel William Bennett. This was not her life. But what was her life? The one she'd left behind felt like a dream. This one, as hard and strange as it was, felt real. The winter camp was in a deep, sheltered canyon. The days grew short, the nights sharp with cold. The first snows dusted the high peaks. Sarah fell into the rhythm of the season, helping to prepare for the long cold, learning the winter stories told around the crackling fires. The tension between Taz and Cale grew worse. They argued openly now. Cale insisted Sarah was a bad omen. He pointed to the poor hunting season, the unusual sickness that had taken 2 elders. He blamed her presence. Taz defended her, arguing that the prophecy must be allowed to unfold. The tribe was split, a deep rift forming between the 2 factions. Sarah felt like the rope in a tug-of-war that could tear the whole tribe apart. One morning, she was gathering firewood when she saw Taz and his hunters returning. They rode hard, their faces grim. "What is it?" she asked as he dismounted. "Blue coats," he said, his voice tight. "A large company. They are building a winter camp in the valley, just 2 days' ride from here. They are searching." A cold fear, sharp and familiar, pierced through her. "For me?" "Perhaps," Taz said, his eyes scanning the camp. "Or perhaps they just hunt Apache. It does not matter. They are too close. And their commander. He is not a man of honor." The camp exploded into quiet, efficient activity. Defenses were prepared. Essentials were packed for a quick escape. Sarah's mind raced. The cavalry. Her people. A way out. But the thought of leaving brought a surprising pang of loss. That night, the tribal council met. Nasha, in a move that shocked everyone, insisted that Sarah be there. "She knows the ways of the blue coats," the old woman argued. "Her wisdom may be needed." Cale protested violently, but the elders, swayed by Nasha's authority, agreed. Sarah sat beside the old woman, her heart pounding as warriors debated their next move. Cale argued for a preemptive strike, a full-scale attack to drive the soldiers off. Others argued for retreat, to vanish deeper into the mountains. Then it was Taz's turn to speak. He stood, his presence commanding the space. "I will go to the Blue Coat camp," he announced. The lodge erupted in murmurs of shock. "And I will take the white woman with me." This time the protests were loud and angry. Even Sarah stared at him in disbelief. Was he insane? "Hear me!" Taz's voice cut through the noise. "She is the daughter of a soldier chief. They will listen to her. She will tell them we are honorable, that we seek only peace. She will ask them to leave our winter grounds." "And if they take her and attack us anyway?" an elder demanded. "Then we fight," Taz said simply. "But first, we must try the path of peace. It is the only way to know if she is the bridge or the fire that burns it. All eyes turned to Sarah. The weight of their gazes was immense. He was placing the fate of his entire people in her hands. He was trusting her, the captive, the outsider, the possible witch, with everything. And in that moment, she knew what she had to do. "I will go," she said, her voice clear and strong in the Apache tongue. "I will speak for the people." The decision hung in the air, as momentous and terrifying as a lightning strike. The path of the prophecy was now before her, and it led straight back into the world she had left behind, a world that might not let her go a second time. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the dying fire, the cold seeping into her bones. Taz came and sat with her. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. "You are afraid," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes," she admitted. "What if they don't listen? What if they see me as a traitor? A savage?" "Speak with an honest heart," he said. "Truth is a weapon they do not expect." She hesitated, then voiced her deepest fear. "What if? What if they don't let me come back?" Taz looked at her, and for the first time she saw surprise in his eyes. "You wish to return?" "Of course I do," she said, the words coming out with a passion that startled her. The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. "This is my home now. You are my family." Something shifted in his face, a mask of warrior stoicism falling away to reveal a deep, aching vulnerability. "When I found you," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I thought the spirit sent me an enemy to test my hatred. Now I see they sent me a friend to heal my heart." He reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm, electric. The space between them crackled. "If the bluecoats keep you," he said, his voice low and fierce, "I will come for you. I will burn their fort to the ground. This I promise." At dawn, she dressed. She put on the deerskin dress, but over it, she wore the tattered remains of her Boston clothes, a bridge between her two selves. Nasha braided her hair, weaving a single hawk feather into it. "Be strong," the old woman whispered. "Remember who you are now." They rode for hours. As they neared the valley, Taz and Sarah went on alone. From a high ridge, she saw it. The neat rows of tents, the smoke from cook fires, the American flag snapping in the wind. It looked alien, a memory from another life. "Wait here," she told Taz. "If I am not back by sunset—" "I will wait," he said, his eyes burning into hers. She took a deep breath and urged her horse down the slope. A shout went up. A patrol rode out to meet her, rifles raised. "Halt!" the lead soldier yelled. "My name is Sarah Bennett," she called out, her voice shaking only slightly. "I am Colonel William Bennett's daughter." The soldiers stared, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Recognition dawned on the patrol leader's face. "Miss Bennett? My God! We thought you were dead." Minutes later, she was in the commander's tent. Major Adams was a man with cold eyes and a cruel set to his mouth. He was her father's replacement, and his rival. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You've been through a terrible ordeal. These savages—" "They are not savages," Sarah cut in, her voice firm. "They have treated me with honor. I am here to ask for peace on their behalf." Adams laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Peace? They are murderers and thieves. They killed your father." "There has been killing on both sides," Sarah shot back. "This war's poisoning the land. It has to stop." She argued for over an hour. Adams listened with a smirk, dismissing everything she said. "You're suffering from captivity syndrome, Miss Bennett. You've been brainwashed. You'll remain here, under my protection." "I am not your prisoner," she said, her anger rising. "Aren't you?" he replied, his eyes glittering. "You are a citizen of the United States, and you are in a military zone under my command. You will do as I say." As the sun began to set, a desperate panic set in. Taz was waiting. He would think she had betrayed him. A young lieutenant, a man who had served under her father, approached her. "Miss Bennett," he said quietly, "don't trust the major. He's not what he seems. Your father. Your father suspected him of selling army rifles to miners, stirring up trouble so he could bring in troops. Sarah stared at him. Why? There's talk of a silver strike in these mountains, the lieutenant whispered. A big one. On land that belongs to the Apache. Adams wants it. It all clicked into place. The large military force. Adams' refusal to even consider peace. This wasn't about rescuing a captive or punishing the Apache. It was about greed. It was about theft on a grand scale. And then the lieutenant delivered the final blow. He knows about the prophecy, Miss Bennet. We found some of your father's old journals. He's not looking for silver. He's looking for the Sky Singer's mine. He thinks you're the key. Sarah's blood ran cold. Adams didn't just want her back. He wanted to use her. He believed the legends. He thought she, the Sky Singer, could lead him to a mythical treasure. She was a prisoner again. But this time, her captor was far more dangerous than any Apache warrior. That night, she made a decision. She wasn't a pawn. She wasn't a key. She was Sarah Bennet. And she was going to end this. Using the sympathetic lieutenant, she got a message to Adams. She told him he was right. She had been foolish. She would help him. She would lead him to the mine. But first, she had to return to the Apache. To gain their trust, she said. To find the location. Adams, blinded by greed, agreed. He saw her as a broken, manipulated girl he could easily control. It was a fatal mistake. She rode out of the camp the next morning, an escort of soldiers following at a distance. As she reached the ridge, she saw him. Taz was there, just as he had promised. His face was a thundercloud. You were long, he said, his voice flat. They wouldn't let me go, she said, sliding from her horse. Taz, it's a trap. It's all a trap. She quickly explained everything. Adams, the silver, the mine from the prophecy, his plan to use her to find it and then wipe out the tribe. As she spoke, Taz's expression shifted from suspicion to cold fury. The Sky Singer's mine is sacred, he said. It is a place of spirits, not shining rock. No white man can enter. Adams doesn't care about spirits, Sarah said. He's bringing his whole force. He thinks I'm leading him to it tomorrow. You are leading him, Taz said, a grim smile on his face, but not to the mine. The plan was desperate. It was dangerous. It might get them all killed, but it was the only way. The next day, Sarah led Major Adams and a company of 50 soldiers deep into the mountains. She followed a route Taz had mapped for her, a winding, treacherous path into a narrow box canyon known to the Apache as the Place of Whispering Rocks. The lieutenant rode beside her, his face pale but determined. He had chosen his side. They're trusting you completely, he murmured. Are you sure about this? I trust them, she said simply. As they entered the canyon, the walls rose up steeply on both sides. The trail narrowed until they were forced into a single file line. The air grew still, heavy. The place had an eerie silence. How much farther? Adams demanded, his voice echoing strangely off the rocks. We're here, Sarah said, pulling her horse to a stop. Adams looked around, his face contorting in confusion and then rage. Here. This is just a canyon. Where is the mine? You've tricked me. There is no mine for you, Sarah said, her voice ringing with a strength she didn't know she possessed. And then the whispering started. It was a low sound at first, a mournful hum that seemed to come from the rocks themselves. Then, from the canyon rim high above, figures appeared. Dozens of them. Apache warriors, bows drawn, rifles aimed. They had been led into a perfect ambush. Kyle was there, his face a mask of triumph. But Taz was not among them. You little traitor! Adams shrieked, drawing his pistol and aiming it at Sarah. Before he could fire, an arrow flew from the cliffs above, striking him in the hand. He screamed, dropping the gun. The lieutenant drew his own pistol and pointed it at the major's head. It's over, Adams! The soldiers were trapped, disarmed, and surrounded. Cale and his warriors descended into the canyon, their victory cries echoing off the stone. This was the battle Kale had wanted, a glorious, bloody triumph. But then a new sound was heard. A single, clear voice, singing an old Apache song. A song of peace. From a hidden passage in the canyon wall, Nasha emerged, walking slowly, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. And behind her was Taz. He wasn't dressed for war. He carried a ceremonial pipe, not a rifle. He walked to the center of the canyon, ignoring the soldiers, ignoring Kyle's furious glare. He looked only at Sarah. "You have chosen the path of the bridge," he said, his voice full of emotion. "You have brought our enemies to us, but you have brought them without bloodshed. You have fulfilled the first part of the prophecy." Kale spat on the ground. "This is not victory. This is a trick. We should kill them all." "And start a war we cannot win?" Taz countered, his voice like steel. "More soldiers would come. They would hunt us to the ends of the earth. This woman has given us a better victory. She has given us justice." At that moment, from the mouth of the canyon, a new group of riders appeared. Blue-coated soldiers. But these were led by a different commander. A general, flanked by the soldiers the lieutenant had secretly sent for. They had the evidence. The journals. The lieutenant's testimony. Major Adams was arrested, his dreams of silver turning to dust. The trapped soldiers surrendered, their relief palpable. The crisis was over. The peace had been won not by war, but by cunning, by trust. In the days that followed, a formal treaty was negotiated. The valley was returned to the Apache. The borders were set. A fragile peace settled over the mountains. Sarah stood on the plateau where Taz had first told her of the prophecy. She was no longer a prisoner, no longer a pawn. She was free. Free to return to the white world, or free to stay. The general had offered her a safe escort back east, a life of comfort, a return to who she used to be. Taz stood beside her. He didn't ask her to stay. He didn't need to. The question was in his eyes. She thought of Boston, a place that now felt more foreign than this wild, beautiful land. She thought of her father, a man she now understood was more complex and courageous than she had ever known. And she thought of these people, the Apache, who had taken her in, tested her, and ultimately accepted her. She looked at Taz, at the future she could have with him. A life of hardship, of challenges, of walking a difficult path between two worlds. A life that would be real. "I think the Sky Singer has found her home," she said softly. A slow smile spread across Taz's face, as bright and beautiful as the desert sunrise. He took her hand, and together they looked out at the land that was now hers. Her journey was far from over. The prophecy was not yet complete. But for the first time since she'd stepped off that stagecoach, she knew exactly who she was. She was Sarah of the Apache. And she was finally home. If you enjoyed Sarah's incredible journey, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. Let me know in the comments below which twist in the story caught you most by surprise. Thanks so much for watching.